prepare you to my talk about Ansible and Jerakia. I work for a Swiss insurance company. I once, after studying, started as a middleware guy. Then I was a middleware Linux guy. And nowadays, since last year, I work for Versicherung in Basel as an automation solution architect. For that, I was working for Balwas, which is also an insurance company, also known in Belgium, I guess. And there I was the technical lead for Linux. Seems I'm the first Jerakia user ever, because with we, I mean Greg Dunn, who's sitting here in the front, and me, we made it happen to release Jerakia. He already had it almost finished, and Balwas was keen to sponsor him to finish Jerakia, and ever since then we worked on implementing new stuff on it. To get you started, a bit of history. Why did we come up with Jerakia? For those of you who've been around for some time in the configuration management space, in the beginning it was quite common that code and configuration data was mixed, which made it quite hard to have maintainable code. The code wasn't shareable as it contained your configuration of your company, and every new exception, so every new host, for example, meant that you need to change the code of your system. Arikina then introduced Hiera, and Hiera, for the first time in the public space, allowed to separate configuration data and automation code. That made it possible that you could share your code with others, that you could have reusable modules, and also with reducing the removing the configuration data out of the code, complexity dropped. All over it became much more easier to handle. But as we all know, the requirements all the time change, and enterprises have different requirements. When we, in 2013, decided to switch at Balwas from SUSE to Red Hat Linux, we said now it's the time to automate stuff. And we wanted to automate all the things. And one of the requirements, for example, was that each team could be responsible for their part of the configuration data. So that, for example, the JBoss middleware team could handle their configuration, that the MySQL database team could handle their configuration. But also we wanted to prevent them that they override, for example, the root password. And with Hiera, this is not possible, as you have to rely on Git most of the time, and you could work with submodules or stuff like that, but yeah, it's not a good way to do it. Therefore, we were discussing with Craig what the possibilities are, and he said, yeah, I've written almost a tool, but it's not yet finished. If you're going to sponsor me, I will finish the tool, and our requirement was that he open sources it. So Jerakia was born. As I said, written by Craig Dunn. You can find his business cards up front, and also stickers for those who haven't seen it. It's written in Ruby. It's not my favorite language, but as it comes from a Puppet background, I think we probably stick with it. It was originally intended as a Hiera backend, and it's when he designed it, he had flexibility in mind. So almost all the parts are pluggable. Nowadays it's a standalone server, so you don't need to have it within your Puppet environment. It has an API. You can just do normal requests to the API and look up data. We'll come to that later. one of the nice things is that you have replaceable data sources, and there's a so-called lookup policy, which is Ruby DSL. We will see that later on. This makes some nice things possible. So the overall architecture of Jerakia is like that. You have a request, which allows you to provide a lookup key, a namespace, and some metadata for the host you want to look up data for. Then you can manipulate with the lookup plugin the scope and the request, and you have interchangeable data sources in the middle. And there are also output plugins, so you can also modify the data that was returned as well. As I said, the key function of Jerakia, which allows you to do the handy stuff and makes it flexible, is the lookup policy. On the right hand side you see an example for a quite minimal version of a lookup policy. And as the topic of the talk is about hierarchical data, you see on the left hand side hierarchy. As it is shown on the top, you have host. So it's normally the lookup order is we go from a special object to more common objects, and the more further down we go on the lookup, the more hosts are in a group normally. So in this case we have host, environment, location, common. If you look at the example here, we give it here the information that we have YAML formatted files, and that the file structure or the hierarchy is located under this path. And then you have here the search path, which meets the lookup order here. So we go to host, to the folder host, and then we replace it with the scope host name. Then we go into the folder environment and replace it, for example, with test or production or whatever the scope is that you handed over to Jerakia. And then we go to location, which could be, for example, a city or whatever. And then we go to common, so all hosts normally. So if you need to change that hierarchy, it's quite easy. You just add whatever you need. You can, for example, add something like function. I was tempted to use role here, but as we're in the Ansible track, and Ansible roles are something different than roles and profiles in Puppet, I came up with the name function when I was discussing that with Craig. If you want to add, for example, certain values for OS specific distribution stuff, you could add the folder OS and then you could say scope OS distribution. So it makes it really easy to add stuff. You could even go further and say you have OS and you have the specific version of, so this would be Red Hat and this would be, for example, 7.6. And we always start on the top and go down. So we first look at the specifics version and then we look at Red Hat in general. And normally Jerakia works in a way that it behaves like IP table, so first match exit. So if a value is found, it returns that data. You can change that behavior, but this is the normal behavior. To the other stuff, I come in a minute. So what does that mean? Here's a quick example. Those are some facts of the host. So we have a host name, ntp1example.com. That server has a function ntp server, the environment is production, location is Frankfurt, OS distribution is Red Hat, OS distribution version is 7.6, and the namespace is ntp. So if we start in the lookup order, first thing is host, so the folder host, then the FQDN, and then as you use the namespace entity, it looks into the file entity.yaml. It returns all the data it finds there. Yes, please.
I assume you can do regexes for the things like host names.
Come again?
You do regexes for the host names and whatever.
So this is depending on the scope you hand in here.
Right.
Yeah. If you go further down, that lookup, we have function, so it replaces the scope function with NTP server. Same for the environment. Keep in mind every time it finds something, so I'm currently talking about the old behavior. Normally you look up with when you use Jerakia with Puppet, you normally do a lookup per key. So for example, if you want to have NTP_servers, you do one request to Jerakia, and Jerakia searches for the NTP_servers in your structure, and if it finds it, it returns it. With Jerakia 3, which is tagged but not yet released officially, it's possible to have keyless lookups, which is quite handy if you want to use it with Ansible. I come to that later. So if we go through this example, you see, we replace all the scope variables here. So you see here, for example, the OS Red Hat 7.6, and then it's ntp.yaml. And we look at each file if the key we're looking for is in there.
So it will return on the first.
Yeah.
It finds from the top.
Exactly. One of the features we needed in our environment was the isolated lookups with Jerakia. So you can have different lookups. You can have a lookup, I call it here MySQL team. You can say if the scope function is MySQL server and the namespace we are looking up is MySQL, then look in this folder, and the structure of underneath, the hierarchy underneath this folder is function, scope function, and common. And if it does not match this, we don't look further. All the other data is looked up still in our main hierarchy. Therefore, you have the possibility to hand out certain configuration to another team. And, they can, for example, create the file and try to set the root password in there. But Jerakia will never look up that data there, because namespace needs to match here, and also the function of the server, so they can only modify a subset of servers and only one special namespace, so an Ansible role, for example. For every other data, we still look it up here in this folder. Another feature of Jerakia is that you can change the merge behavior. So for some data it might be good to not exit on the first match, but go through all of your data and return every found key, and you can change the behavior here. So for example, if you have users, maybe you want to set for certain servers additional users, or for your test machines you want to have certain users. You don't want to exit on the first match, but you want to have all the other users that you defined under common as well. Then you can change that with schemas in Jerakia. You can do that per key. This is what Jerakia did since we invented it more or less. As I mentioned earlier, in the past it used one lookup per key. This is what Puppet also used. Now that I switched jobs and my job as a automation configuration or automation solution architect is to look into Ansible and Ansible Tower as a central automation platform for the company. I was asking myself, how do I structure data with Ansible? I looked a bit around and I found out I have, last time I checked, 22 different places where I can put variables, which seems a bit weird. Then I also had the impression that it's quite common that you have one big Git repository where you have your vars, so your group vars, your host vars. Some people also have a roles folder where they download stuff into it, so not using requirements YAML. So you have one big repository with stuff in it. As it should be the central platform for automation, I expect that different teams want to use data or change data for the stuff they are responsible for. So, yeah, I came up quite early up with the idea to use Jerakia for it, and I knew that Craig already done some work on that. So Craig wrote a lookup plugin for Ansible already in 2017 for Ansible. But as you can see in the example down here, the downside is that you, for each variable, need to do a lookup. So if you have multiple variables you want to set, you would need to write a lot of code, and you would need to write code for each role you want to use, for example. And also, this boils down to having one request per variable, which so far is not bad, but as we know, Ansible is capable of connecting to multiple hosts at the same time. So you say you connect to 50 hosts and you have 50 variables you want to look up. It's much more traffic than you would need. So in 2018, I discussed with Craig what possibilities we have, and I invited him over for a week, and we sit down and we're trying different things out. The result is that we came up with a new major version of Jerakia. It's called Jerakia 3.0, which introduces keyless lookups. So you can now say, give me all keys for the namespace NTP, for example, or give me all keys for the namespace YAM or whatever role you have. And then it will look into Jerakia and will return over your hierarchy all the keys it finds in the context of your scope and your metadata. We also wrote a Python library, which is available on GitHub, which is not yet on the cheese shop. We're working on that. Tomorrow there will be a hack day on Jerakia. I guess there might be some improvement on that side, and then we can probably make it official and release it and so on. We discussed at that hack session in November, I think it was, October, different possibilities. So Ansible provides multiple ways to implement plugins. So the first idea was to use an inventory plugin to fetch the data from Jerakia. But all the stuff we came up with had downsides, and so I finally went on the Ansible Devil channel and talked to Brian Koka, and he was really helpful, and he said, yeah, go with a normal module. So this is what we are now working with. So we wrote, based on the Python library, an Ansible module which allows you to hand over the different metadata for your host. So normal Ansible run is like you connect to the host, do the gather facts thing, get all the information about the OS, for example. You might have already some stuff coming from the inventory, and then you hand over the data that you rely on in the lookup to Jerakia. You hand it over to Jerakia, and Jerakia searches the hierarchy and gives you back all the data. The module works in a way that it populates all the facts in Ansible. Ansible has no concept for namespacing other than Puppet, therefore they are all top-level variables. So you rely on naming. It's quite common to have prefixes, as you all know, in Ansible. So normally you have something like entity underscore something. If you have multiple variables with the same name, you got a problem. I had a quick chat with someone from Red Hat. We're planning to get this upstream into Ansible. I'll need to sort out some things with my company for contributing back to open source. This is not such a big thing we currently do, but we are willing to participate, so we need to get some things straight here, but yeah, quite sure we will get this done. Do you have questions so far?
Do you know the tool named Spruce?
No.
This is a tool for merging data from YAML. It was used by Bosch automation tools.
Okay.
You may be really interested in that because they, for example, allow merging YAML files, and for example, they have also filters to remove certain things. So in general, they are using it to, for example, render templates and add keys or remove keys. So there are some pretty interesting things going on.
What's the name?
Spruce, S-P-R-U-C-E.
Okay.
It's on GitHub.
Okay. Do you know in which language it's written?
Golang.
Golang, okay. Now we'll probably have a look at that.
I know a little bit about it, and it's similar to, but it's not like a REST API.
Mm-hmm.
It's more towards, in my opinion, towards POC workflows more, or templating workflows.
Yeah.
While this is a different approach because it's using API to query data, and nothing in the API is actually like a YAML in any form.
Exactly.
Yes, yes.
As you can have different data sources in backend.
Mm-hmm.
You have HTTP data source, for example. Any more questions?
What kind of backends can you connect Jerakia to?
So we in the past used File, which normally worked like we had Git repositories which were synced through an event or through a cron job. You could have HTTP, you could have console at the moment, I think.
Console's in the call, yeah.
Yeah. Anything else?
Not shit, no.
Not sure.
Okay.
Then I'll try to give a quick live demo. It's based on a CentOS machine with Ansible and the Jerakia module for Python, as well as the Jerakia container from Docker Hub. So the 3.0 Jerakia is on Docker Hub, and the Ansible Jerakia module or role to do the data lookup. here is rather easy playbook, which calls a role which is called Jerakia lookup and hands over a token, so you need to authenticate against Jerakia. And I set the lookup namespace manually here. The role we have is quite easy. So we have in the library, we have the Python module, which is not so interesting. And we have also a small task or the task file where we set the different variables that the module takes. There's also defaults. So you see that we use a lot of the Ansible facts that come from the host to look up stuff. For the demo, I also got a policy file. So the hierarchy looks like this in the container. And we also have some data. As you see, for the host, host2 example.com, there's an NTP file. For OS specific data is an NTP file. If I we have this, and for the host we have this data, but this is specific to one host. If I run now the playbook, the inventory file currently has only one host in it. So we see this is the data which gets populated by Jerakia. And if we look here, I set Jerakia to debug. You can see what was handed over. So you can see here in the request metadata stuff, like a host name, OS distribution, 7.6, and so on. You can also see the function name, and then it starts querying for NTP. And it starts with the host, with the function, environment, the patient, OS, and then it finds the data and returns it. What we now can do is we could add, for example, HD, firewall, D, whatever, stuff like that, and rerun that. You will still get no more data, but you will now see in the debug output that it looks up all, here for example, the SSHD YAML file. So you have all those. It starts here with NTP. Here's NTP, sorry. Then we have SSHD, firewall D. And if we add more hosts into our inventory, so for example, a second host, see, those hosts do not exist currently, so they are just live in my inventory. I set all the variables here in the inventory. I'm not doing the gather facts thing, but it's the same. Now we see that we get for each host data. So we have host 1 here. And we get back entity center 761 example of com for entity service and 2. And for the host 2, we get a different set of data back. So we get back entity secret, which is an Ansible vault encrypted value. And we have entity service. So this is what Jerakia found for that host. We could also put the Ansible, the entity secret somewhere else in the hierarchy so that it picked up both hosts, for example. We can also change our playbook now to write that secret to the local machine. Just make sure that there is no run this again. Okay. Sorry. So the first host fails now, as the variable is not populated, but the second host is able to look up the data, and I wrote it to Ansible secret, to entity secret. So we have here the decrypted value now. So Ansible on the fly decrypts it with a vault password. Anything else you want to see or questions for that? Yes?
Is there a reason you did not put the complete inventory in Jerakia?
Come again, please.
Why didn't you put the complete inventory in Jerakia?
Then I would need to use an inventory plugin to look up
Yeah.
the hosts from Jerakia, but it's possible, but we haven't written that yet.
Okay.
Because for my company, we are currently undecided what the inventory will be in the future. So we plan to use Ansible as the automation platform for everything. So also network devices, for example, and they're currently working on a CMDB ServiceNow. So the idea is to hook up Ansible with ServiceNow. But if this fails, we will probably add the data to Jerakia and use this as an inventory. So it's possible, but we haven't done it yet. Our focus was on how to separate the configuration data from code and make it possible for the different teams to be able to handle their code. Any more questions to the demo? Okay. Try to switch back. So what are the takeaways here? Takeaways are Jerakia can be used as a single source of truth for your configuration. It enables you to be independent from your tools. So, for example, my former employer is using Puppet at the moment, but they're looking also into Ansible. They have all their configuration data already in Jerakia. They don't need to duplicate the data. Jerakia does not care what tool you use. You have a single source of truth here. We already have connectors for Puppet, Ansible, and some people are also using Jerakia with Terraform. and it's quite easy to integrate into other tools. So I think Greg was approached from someone regarding SaltStack yesterday. So if someone is interested to get this implemented, probably come tomorrow to the hack day or reach out to Greg or to me on GitHub. Make an issue for whatever tool you want to have integrated. I think there's also a Golang library for Jerakia, a Python library, Ruby, first class citizen. Yeah. There you see some resources. So Jerakia has webpage Jerakia.io. Greg Dunn has his personal blog where he wrote a lot of blog posts about Jerakia, for example, using HashiCorp Vault as a encryption as a service for Jerakia. So at Valwas we used HashiCorp Vault to encrypt the data and store it into Jerakia, and then look it up on the Puppet run. So it was decrypted with Vault, and the Puppet agent was able to write the decrypted file on the fly. Craig moved all of the Jerakia stuff into a project on GitHub, so it's no longer living under his personal account. So have a look there. Contact us if you have questions or issues or want more integrations. As I said, tomorrow hack day. Don't know when do you start tomorrow?
I think it's 10 o'clock, I think. It's on the schedule.
It's on the schedule, okay.
10 o'clock.
Okay. So, if you have more questions, please. Otherwise, thank you. Yes.
Can you limit, like for example, can any host gather any configuration of any host? Like
No.
if there's a bad actor on the network and I ask the SQL password for something else, is Jerakia limiting the output of that password somehow?
You have to authenticate against Jerakia. So normally put that secret on your Ansible host, and the Ansible host talks to Jerakia.
Okay.
Same thing applies for the Puppet Master. Normally the Puppet Master talks to Jerakia, so you don't spread the secret to authenticate against Jerakia over your environment normally.
Okay.
There is any way to filter once you gain access, you have a token, you can filter, you can have limited tokens for limited type of data?
Not yet.
Not yet.
We're looking at ways, because we can have multiple tokens, so we're looking at ways to do exactly that, to be able to do more like a role-based access for tokens.
Exactly.
We're looking at ideas for that.
Okay.
I've got a question. Does Jerakia is read-only, or can, for example, populate the backends with if you have a token?
No, it's read-only.
Because you can have whatever pluggable data sources you want.
Yeah.
Having data flowing the other way is just
Okay.
yeah, it doesn't fit. It's not a database; it's a looking tool.
Okay.
Yes.
Yes. There's a string substitution output plugin, so you can put tokens in your data that will get substituted. There's a dig plugin, so if your data source returns a data structure and you don't want the whole data structure, you want to drill down into it and pull something out. They're all on the Jerakia.io site.
Could the same concept be used to, instead of giving back everything, transform in such a way that it won't be contained in inventory?
Yes. Yes. Yeah. I can't think why. Yeah. I mean, you could do what you want with the data in an output plugin, and they're extendable as well, so you can write your own and drop them in.
More questions?